I am Alexander Volkov, though everyone calls me Sasha. Special Forces, Recon. My skin has memorized fear. My mind has cataloged every shadow that might hide a threat. Yet, as I step into the Siberian taiga, a cold shiver snakes along my spine, one I haven't felt in years of warfare. Not the fear of a man, not the fear of a gun, something else. Something patient. The task is simple on paper: locate a research team of 3 who vanished a week ago. That week has stretched into days that smell of pine resin, frozen earth, and old snow, with an undercurrent of something rotten. I should feel confident. I've walked through ambushes in Chechnya, patrolled mines in Afghanistan, survived blizzards where men literally froze into statues. But here, in this forest, I am not merely cautious. I am watched. I can feel it in my bones, the same way a soldier feels the twitch of distant gunfire before the first bullet leaves a barrel. The forest is alive in a way that unsettles me. The air is thick with the smell of damp needles and decaying moss. The fog rolls between the trunks in thick sheets, wrapping around my legs like cold fingers. Snow muffles the crunch of my boots, yet I sense echoes that aren't mine. Tiny, deliberate, unnatural sounds. A snap of a branch too far to be caused by my step. A rustle behind me that vanishes when I turn. I check my equipment. Rifle clean, scope adjusted, knife sharpened. Standard survival pack. Minimal, efficient, the way I like it. The wind shifts, carrying something with it, something metallic, or a distant warning. My breath clouds in front of me, and I notice the forest light has dimmed, as though the trees themselves conspire to swallow the day. I pause beside a frozen stream. Water trickles beneath ice, dark and sluggish. Across the bank, a tree leans at an impossible angle, and for a split second, I swear I see a figure crouched behind it. But when I lift my scope, the tree is empty. Just a trick of the light. I force a slow exhale. My training tells me to observe, catalog, and adapt. But instinct tells me this place is wrong. I move cautiously, the snow swallowing my steps. Every crack of a branch, every whisper of wind is amplified. My ears are attuned to unnatural repetition. I remember something my sergeant used to say: "Fear is a compass, Sasha. Follow it." I follow it now, deep into the heart of the taiga. 3 kilometers in, I find the first signs: footprints, irregular, hasty, partially covered by snow. Not fresh, but not old. Whoever or whatever left them moved with purpose. Then a sound, a low, guttural hum, like a throat trying to speak underwater. I freeze. Nothing moves. The hum stops. I consider calling out, but instinct screams against it. I press forward. My mission is search and rescue, not negotiation, not speculation. Survival first, others second. Still, the hairs on my neck prick with the weight of unseen eyes. Trees seem to lean closer as I pass, shadows stretching like tendrils across the snow. By late afternoon, I reach the research site, or what remains of it. The small clearing is littered with upturned tents, equipment scattered, half buried under snow. No footprints lead out. The air carries a metallic tang. Blood? Or just rusted equipment thawing? I cannot tell. My pulse accelerates. I check my rifle. Safety off. Every sense sharp, alert, cataloging, remembering. A notebook lies in the snow, pages soaked, ink smeared. I flip it open carefully, snow clinging to the paper. Words are jumbled, frantic. Heard it. Not alone. Do not trust voices. The last line, barely legible. It knows us. I hear my brother calling. Don't go. I shiver, despite the layers of clothing. My training kicks in. I'm the operative, the professional. But something deep inside my mind whispers the truth. I am not dealing with a man. The forest darkens faster than expected. Fog thickens, weaving through trees and snaring light. I hear a voice call my name, Sasha. Low, trembling, unmistakably human. I spin toward the sound, weapon raised. Nothing. Just the fog and the soft thrum of my own heartbeat in my ears. I call back. Who's there? My voice is steady, practiced, though my stomach churns. No reply. Only silence. But the sense of being watched intensifies. Then the voice again, closer, the house behind me, taunting, coaxing. Sasha, Sasha, I do not turn. I know better. I move sideways, slow, deliberate, rifle scanning. Another branch snaps. I pivot, ready to fire. Nothing. The fog hides everything. My mind races. This is no ordinary predator. No wolf, no bear. Something different. Something smart. watching, learning, manipulating fear itself. I set up a temporary position in a hollowed grove. I need a vantage, need to observe without being seen. The wind shifts, carrying the faintest sound of movement, a brush of fabric, a sigh. I cannot tell. My ears strain. My eyes dart from shadow to shadow. Hours pass. Darkness encroaches. Every rustle, every whisper, every half-glimpsed figure feels deliberate, like it knows me. I can almost feel it learning the patterns of my fear, probing the edges of my mind. At some point, I realize the snow is no longer crisp beneath my boots. Tracks circle me, perfectly, impossibly, tracing the edges of my grove. Not animal, not human, something else, something patient and intelligent. The night deepens and I lie flat, rifle across my chest. The voice comes again, this time a chorus, the voices of the missing research team, calling my name, crying for help. Each voice distinct, each terrified. I grit my teeth, clench my jaw, focus on breathing. I know better. I do not answer. I wait. Hours pass in an eternity of cold, fear, and impossible whispers. Then silence. A calm that is too deep, too knowing. My training screams at me. It is waiting, studying, planning. I realize finally that I am no longer merely searching for the missing. I am the prey now. The night drags on, stretching seconds into eternities. My teeth chatter despite the layers of clothing, and my fingers sting inside the gloves. The snow under my body hardens as frost seeps into my bones. I force myself to stay awake. Sleep is a liability when the predator is patient, intelligent, waiting for even the smallest lapse. I roll onto my side, scanning the grove through the scope. Shadows flicker across the fog, but nothing solid emerges. Still, I feel its presence. A cold, suffocating weight, like the forest itself, has leaned in just to watch me. I listen. The whispered voices return, closer now, repeating names I have never heard, begging for help. My mind strains to catalog them, to discern patterns. Training keeps me anchored. Analyze, anticipate, survive. I grip my rifle tighter. Every muscle in my body is taut. The predator, whatever it is, does not move like an animal. Not with claws or fangs, at least not yet. It moves with intent, precision, adapting to my tactics. It has waited. It has watched. And now it is studying the fear it has cultivated in me. Hours pass, or maybe minutes. Time is meaningless here. Then I hear a soft crunching, deliberate circling me. My heart accelerates, but I force calm, scanning methodically. Across the grove, a tree trunk shifts impossibly. A shadow stretches unnaturally, almost human in shape, but wrong. Limbs too long, angles too sharp. I do not fire. Not yet. I need more information. A whisper behind me, "Sasha, you shouldn't be here," makes me flinch. I pivot, sweeping the rifle across the fog. Nothing. Only the snow, only the trees, only the oppressive darkness that seems almost sentient. My skin crawls. I remind myself, this is a predator. Not ghosts, not hallucinations, but the voices. The voices are a weapon. I start moving slowly, deliberately, stepping over fallen branches, leaving no imprint where possible. I circle the grove, scanning, listening. My mind traces every footfall, every echo, every anomaly in the fog. The predator is clever, luring me as I learn it. Then I hear it, the softest exhale right behind me. I freeze. My breath becomes shallow, controlled. Slowly, deliberately, I pivot. Nothing. Yet the air carries the faintest metallic tang, sharp against the frozen earth. My gut screams. I know it is close, closer than anything should be without my senses detecting it. I back toward the frozen stream. Water trickles beneath ice, dark and silent. The fog swirls unnaturally here, almost condensing into shapes that vanish when I focus. My pulse pounds. My training fights panic with calculation. I lay down a trap in my mind. The predator mimics voices. It adapts. I cannot let it anticipate my movements. I move again, careful, deliberate, and notice fresh footprints in the snow. One set, impossibly human, leading directly toward me. They stop abruptly. I crouch low, scanning the fog. Shadows lengthen. Something moves, quick, silent, between the trees. My rifle rises instinctively, scope trained. And then I see it, clearly for the first time. A figure crouched in the fog, impossible angles to its limbs, eyes glinting faintly like wet stones. It tilts its head, observing me as if I am an experiment, a puzzle to be solved. The forest hums around it, alive with an energy I cannot name. My throat tightens, but my training keeps my finger off the trigger. Yet. I whisper, almost to myself, "What are you?" It steps forward, and for a moment I see the familiar face of one of the missing researchers, eyes wide with terror. The face twists, elongates, then vanishes into shadow. I fire instinctively. A crack echoes across the grove, bullets tearing through fog. Impact is uncertain. The figure is gone. Only the snow disturbed impossibly, as if it moved beneath the surface itself. Adrenaline surges, and I sprint toward the denser part of the forest, scanning, pivoting, listening. It follows. I know it. The voice returns, calling in a dozen variations, some pleading, some mocking, all pulling at the edges of my mind. My hands tremble slightly, not from fear exactly, but from the constant vigilance, from knowing that one mistake means death. I remember my survival training. Isolation magnifies threats. Confuse it. Create patterns it cannot predict. I kick a branch, divert my tracks, zigzag through trees. For a moment, it hesitates. I hear it. Not quite a footstep, not quite a rustle. Calculated. Testing me, learning me. Hours blur, exhaustion gnaws at me. The cold seeps deeper. I collapse briefly behind a massive spruce, rifle ready, ears straining. The snow around me shifts. I freeze. The figure emerges from the fog, taller now, faceless, limbs twisting unnaturally, emanating a presence that presses on my chest, makes my lungs feel heavy. It mimics my voice. "Sasha, drop the rifle. It's just me." I grit my teeth, muscles coiled like springs. I do not answer. I do not move. My mind races through contingency plans, fire patterns, escape routes, psychological tricks. Then I remember, it imitates fear, feeds on hesitation. So I act. I throw a small flare from my pack, not directly at it, but to the side. Light cuts through the fog, stark and white. I pivot, sprint. The predator shrieks, not human, not animal, a sound that twists through the forest and rattles my teeth. My legs burn, snow swallowing each step, but I push harder. Through the trees, I see the river glint faintly, moonlight striking the frozen surface. Safety? Not really. But distance. I leap across a shallow stream, snow and ice shattering beneath me. I glance back. The fog is rolling slower now, retreating, yet I know the creature hasn't left. It watches, it waits. Smarter than I am at this moment, faster, patient beyond measure. I find temporary cover behind a fallen trunk. Breath ragged, body screaming from exertion and cold as I try to make sense. Bullets do not work as expected. Flare confused it, but only for moments. This thing adapts, studies, mimics. I realize the horrifying truth. There is no brute force solution. Survival depends on outthinking it, and even that may not be enough. I sit, knees drawn up, rifle across my lap. The wind shifts, carrying the faintest echoes of the researchers' voices again, pleading, warning, crying. I know one thing. I am not alone, yet no one is here. The predator is patient. It will not rush. And I have no illusions about the night ahead. Somewhere in the forest I hear a low exhale, a breath that is mine and not mine. My pulse accelerates, my instincts scream, it is near, closer than I can see. I grip my rifle tighter, scan methodically, and whisper to myself, think, survive, outsmart it. The darkness presses. Fog curls around trees, around shadows, around possibilities. The entity is out there, and it knows me now. Not just my body, not just my voice, but my fear, my patterns, my strategies. I take a deep breath, preparing to move again. The hunt is not over. It has begun in earnest, and somewhere in the frozen, ancient taiga, I know the forest itself is holding its breath. The fog thickens, curling around the trunks like living fingers. Every shadow is a threat. My breath comes in controlled bursts, but my lungs burn from exertion. I've been running, hiding, circling, but it doesn't tire. It doesn't sleep. The predator is patient beyond comprehension. I press along the riverbank, the ice beneath cracking faintly with each step. Moonlight glints off jagged ice, illuminating nothing but uncertainty. I know I cannot fight it head-on. Bullets only confuse it. Flares startle it for moments. Every instinct in my body screams, outthink it or die. I find a narrow alcove in the frozen embankment, a small cave formed by fallen rock and ice. It's cramped, claustrophobic, but concealment is worth the discomfort. I crawl inside, rifle raised, scanning the darkness beyond. Outside, the fog moves unnaturally. I swear I can see shapes weaving between trees, shadows too precise, too deliberate. Then I hear the mimicry again. A soft whisper, almost tender. "Sasha, come to us. It's safe." The voice of the missing researcher I thought I'd seen last night. I grit my teeth. That is its weapon: familiarity, trust, manipulation. My training reminds me to compartmentalize. It wants me to panic, to hesitate, to make mistakes. I lean against the icy wall, whispering into the darkness, talking to myself to stay grounded. Think. Move. Predict. I recall an old survival tactic from the military: confuse the predator, force it to guess, force it to act. I spread small chunks of reflective metal I carry in my pack, bits of equipment, broken lens covers, mirror fragments, toward the opening of the alcove. I leave them like breadcrumbs, then slip to the opposite end. The faint glinting in the moonlight acts as bait. I wait. Minutes crawl. The fog shifts. Shapes emerge. I see it. Not entirely human, not entirely animal. Limbs twisted, face constantly reshaping, eyes glinting like dark stones. It moves toward the light fragments, testing, analyzing. I hold my breath. The creature pauses, cocking its head in unnatural angles. My mind races, calculating next moves. I hurl a small flare beyond the alcove into the fog-heavy forest. Light bursts, stark and white. The predator jerks, an unnatural screech escaping it, a sound not of this world, a hybrid of growl, hum, and twisted imitation of human cry. I use the distraction, crawling silently along the alcove wall deeper, aiming for a faint path leading away from the clearing. It notices. Of course it notices. Shapes flicker across the fog. I hear the mimicry again, frantic, overlapping, louder. "Sasha, Sasha, don't leave us." I run. Snow slaps against my boots, icy wind bites my cheeks, branches whip against my face, snow blinding me in sudden gusts. My heart hammers, but I push forward, forcing myself to focus on the rhythm of survival. Breathe, scan, move, adapt. A sharp crack, like a branch snapping, erupts behind me. The predator is close, testing. I dive into a shallow ditch, rolling into a tangle of icy roots. Pain shoots through my shoulder, but I press on. Through the fog, I glimpse it again, a twisted reflection of every human it has mimicked, standing silently, watching. Then it vanishes. Only the forest remains, silent and cold, yet I feel it. Waiting, still calculating, still patient. Hours pass, or what feels like hours. Exhaustion and adrenaline merge into a single blur of motion. Finally, I see faint light ahead, a utility shack, abandoned, half-collapsed, probably left by researchers as shelter during fieldwork. It's small, but it's solid. A chance to regroup, maybe barricade, maybe rest. I stumble forward, breath ragged, body screaming with cold and fatigue. Inside, the shack smells of mildew, rust, and old wood. A tangle of wires and broken instruments lies scattered. I barricade the door as best I can, stacking crates and planks. My fingers are numb, but the urgency keeps me moving. I press my back against the wall, rifle ready, scanning through the cracked windows. Fog rolls by outside, thick and suffocating, shapes fleeting through it like dark currents in water. I know it is outside. I can feel its awareness pressing through the walls, probing the edges of my mind. It wants me to slip, to doubt, to panic. I breathe, counting slowly, grounding myself. Exhale, inhale, inhale. Then a sudden chilling sound, faint tapping on the shack wall. Metal against wood, deliberate, precise. My heart nearly stops. The predator is outside, testing the structure, waiting, knowing I am trapped. I think fast. I cannot defeat it. I cannot fight it head on, but I can escape its observation, even briefly. I grab a rope from my pack, tying it to a sturdy support beam. Then I loop the other end around a jagged plank, rigging a crude pulley. If I can use the roof to exit above the windows, it may not predict the path. My hands are raw, bleeding slightly from frostbite, but I force the movements. The creature taps again, closer now on the opposite wall. I freeze. Time dilates. I whisper to myself, do not hesitate. Move when ready. Survive. I climb the interior support, hoisting myself to the roof. The wood creaks under my weight. Outside, fog swirls violently, masking my silhouette. I leap from the shack onto a fallen tree bridging a shallow ravine. I run, leaping between snow-covered trunks, following the faint curve of the river I memorized earlier. I glance back. A shape moves fluidly through the fog. A ripple, a distortion. a shadow too precise to be natural. It pauses near the shack, hovering as if studying, then recedes into the forest. I know it is patient. It will not give up. I keep moving. Dawn begins to creep over the horizon, thin, gray light spilling into the fog. My muscles scream, lungs burn, but relief creeps in. The river guides me, the forest seems less oppressive in the growing light. Yet I cannot shake the feeling. I am not safe. I am merely surviving another night. Hours later, I stumble onto an old logging path. Footprints, my own, others long gone, crunch beneath the thawing snow. I signal for extraction, voice hoarse, hands shaking. The chopper will arrive in minutes. I lean against a tree, trembling, exhausted but alive. And yet, in the distance, the fog stirs again. Shapes move between the trees. The voices whisper faintly on the wind. The predator did not follow me this far, not yet, but I know it is there. Watching, learning, waiting. I survive the night, but the forest keeps its secrets, and the hunter remains. The taiga is ancient, patient, and relentless. I will leave, but a piece of my mind will linger here, forever haunted by the eyes I never truly saw, the voices that were not human, and the thing that waits silently in the fog. My name is Dr. Elias Varga, and I've spent most of my life studying the Earth's hidden movements. I was sent to Alaska to chase tremors, to log numbers and place seismographs in a frozen valley where no one lives, where even the maps give up and show only white space. My colleagues joked that I'd come back with frostbite or not at all. But I took the assignment. Not for the stipend, not even for the recognition, but because something about this valley, its unrecorded quakes, its absence in geological surveys, gnawed at me. I had to see it for myself. The helicopter dropped me off at dusk. The pilot didn't linger. He muttered something about fuel, but I saw his eyes avoid the horizon. He didn't want to be here after dark. I stood alone as the rotors dwindled into the distance, and the silence returned with a weight I felt in my chest. The air smelled metallic, like snow scraped off iron. Beneath my boots, the ice shifted, quietly, like a throat clearing far away. I told myself it was nothing, just the valley breathing with the cold. But the first detail that unsettled me was the way the wind carried whispers. Not words, not really, but patterns. Too patterned for randomness. I zipped my parka tighter and set up camp near a jagged outcrop of basalt that jutted from the glacier like a rib bone. The sky darkened fast. Stars pierced through like needles, and with them came a sound I couldn't place, a low groan, deep in the ground. My instruments vibrated before I even switched them on. When I did, the seismograph traced lines I'd never seen before, loops, curls, as though the earth wasn't shaking, but speaking. By the second night, the unease had sharpened into something heavier. My fire popped and hissed, the smoke curling strangely sideways, though the air was still. When I stepped away from the camp to take a reading, I heard footsteps crunching the snow behind me. I froze. My radio lay back at the tent. Slowly, I turned. No one. Just black spruce clustered at the edge of the valley, their tops swaying as though something large had brushed past them. The snow was unbroken, except for my trail. Still, the sound persisted, one step after mine, perfectly timed. I didn't sleep that night. Each time I closed my eyes, the ground would groan and the rocks near camp would shift with the sound, tilting just slightly, as though aligning themselves. I'd been in earthquake zones before, but this was different. This was deliberate. By the fourth day, I began to suspect the valley wasn't recording me. I was recording it. Each note I took, each measurement, it already seemed to anticipate. My GPS flickered, giving coordinates that spiraled back on themselves. And at twilight, when the cold sank deepest, I swore I heard my name in the wind. Ilias. Drawn out, stretched across the frozen air like a wire, I dropped the seismograph probe. My breath plumed fast in the cold. No one knew my exact coordinates. The pilot hadn't asked my name, and the voice hadn't been distorted. It had been mine. I didn't move for a long time after hearing my own name. The cold bit through my gloves, into the bone of my fingers as I clutched the probe, but I didn't dare lift my eyes from the valley floor. The dark was complete now, except for the weak halo of my headlamp. It felt like being underwater, my light barely piercing the vast black that pressed in on every side. I forced myself back to camp, each step careful, measured, though my chest hammered like I'd sprinted. At the tent flap, I stopped. The zipper was already open. I knew I'd left it shut. I always did, to keep the heat in. Inside, the air was colder than outside. My sleeping bag lay unfurled, but not where I'd placed it. It had been dragged to the corner, stretched taut as though something heavy had lain inside it. My breath shook, clouding in the air. The radio sat on the crate by the sleeping bag, but the indicator light was glowing faint red. I hadn't turned it on. I reached for it, my gloved hand trembling, and lifted it close to my ear. For a moment, only static. Then, through the crackle, a sound like ice splitting apart, and beneath it, a low voice. Varga. I dropped the radio so fast it bounced against the tent pole. The sound lingered in my ears even after it was gone, like it had bypassed hearing altogether and spoken directly into me. That night, I kept the lantern on until the fuel ran low. Every shadow inside the tent shifted in ways that weren't natural. Slow, deliberate bends against the canvas, as though someone circled the tent, pressing their hands against it. When exhaustion dragged me under, I dreamt of glaciers opening like mouths, their tongues black with stone, teeth of ice grinding in hunger. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I couldn't explain what I'd heard or seen, but my instincts, owned from years of fieldwork in unforgiving terrain, told me one thing. If I stayed, I wouldn't leave. I'd pack, hike down the valley, find a clearing large enough for a rescue helicopter. The sun rose weakly, a pale coin struggling behind clouds, and I began loading my sled. The crunch of snow beneath my boots echoed strangely, as if mirrored by a second set a heartbeat behind. I forced myself not to look. My work case snapped shut, and with the seismograph strapped down, I turned to collapse the tent. That's when I saw it. At the edge of the spruce, where the light barely reached, stood a figure. Human-shaped, tall, draped in something that shimmered like ice under skin. It didn't move, didn't breathe, but its head tilted in the exact way mine did when I adjusted my glasses, a small, unconscious habit I'd never noticed until I saw it mimic me. I froze, gripping the tent pole like a weapon. My first thought wasn't even rational. It's me. The figure didn't step forward. Instead, the ground beneath my boots vibrated. Not a quake, more like a heartbeat. A deep subterranean thump that resonated in my chest cavity, making my ribs ache. The trees bent with the pulse, their branches swaying though the air was still. I backed toward the sled, fumbling for the radio again, but it was gone. The crate sat empty, its lid flipped open. I scanned the snow, no footprints, no drag marks, as though it had never existed. My throat went dry. "You don't want me here," I muttered aloud, my voice shaking. "I understand." The figure tilted its head again, then dissolved back into the trees without taking a single step. Not walking, not vanishing, just reabsorbed, as if it had only been a fold in the forest's shadow. Every instinct screamed at me to flee. I lashed the sled rope to my harness and started pulling, my breath coming fast in the frozen air. The crunching footsteps followed again, steady as a metronome. Every time I quickened pace, so did they. The valley narrowed as I moved, basalt cliffs closing in, their surfaces slick with old ice. Here, the silence became suffocating. Even the wind had abandoned this place. The only sound was the echo of my boots, and the phantom echo paired with them. Hours passed. My body numbed into mechanical movement. Pull, step, drag, breathe. Yet the landscape refused to change. The same jagged ridges, the same solitary spruce leaning at an angle. My GPS flickered and reset itself, coordinates looping back to where I'd begun. It dawned on me with cold horror. The valley wasn't letting me out. I dropped to my knees, chest heaving, fog spilling from my mouth. A sled strap cut into my shoulders like a noose. My thoughts raced, snapping between logic and madness. If this was a seismic anomaly, a magnetic field interference, maybe the instruments could pick up a pattern. If it was something else, something alive, then maybe it was reading me, learning from me, feeding on my recognition. I set up the portable seismograph in the snow, my fingers numb as I jammed the probes into the ice. The paper feed began to scratch out lines, jagged peaks. At first, the normal spiking rhythm of tremors, but then the spikes bent into curves, letters. VARGA, I stared until my vision blurred, my own name written by the earth itself. The ice cracked beneath me with a report like thunder. I stumbled back, nearly falling into the sudden fissure that split open where I'd been kneeling. Steam rolled up, warm against the air, carrying with it a smell I'll never forget. Copper and rot, as though something ancient and bleeding shifted far below. From the fissure, sound rose. Not seismic, not natural. Voices. All my life I've listened to the language of stone and pressure, the groans of mountains as they moved. But this was different. This was language, a chorus of voices, too many to count, each one shaping my name with precision. Elias Varga, Elias Varga, Elias Varga. I clapped my hands over my ears and screamed, but the sound was inside me, vibrating my bones. I could feel it in the fillings of my teeth. The fissure widened. The sled jolted as one of its runners tilted toward the crack. I scrambled, unhooking the rope from my harness, and pulled the sled free with all the strength left in me. My instruments tumbled into the snow, scattering like bones. When the voices cut off, the silence was worse. The fissure closed, not slowly, with a snap, like jaws shutting. I stood there shaking, sweat freezing against my skin, my breath a ragged cloud. The valley had spoken my name. Not just the wind, not just hallucinations. The earth itself knew me now. I forced myself onward, dragging what little I could salvage, each step heavier with dread. The cliffs around me leaned closer, as though watching. Every rock face, every ripple in the ice seemed to hold faint impressions, eyes, mouths, twisted expressions that dissolved when I blinked. I don't remember how long I walked before I saw camp again. My camp, the tent perfectly reassembled, the sled neatly unpacked, the radio glowing faint red on the crate, exactly as it had been the first night. I fell to my knees in the snow. The valley hadn't just trapped me, it had reset me, like a loop, like I had never left. And from somewhere deep in the frozen ground, the heartbeat pulsed again. I don't remember standing, but suddenly I was upright again, snow clinging to my knees, my heart a frantic drum in my ribs. The tent sat in front of me, its fabric still damp from the previous night, though I had collapsed it, packed it, dragged it hours down the valley. I stared until my eyes blurred, certain this was a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion. Yet when I stepped forward and pulled the flap open, my sleeping bag was inside, warm to the touch. I stumbled back, the bile rising in my throat. This wasn't a storm, not a tremor, not some optical illusion. The valley itself had pulled me back, rewound me like tape. The rational part of my brain clawed for footing. Maybe I got turned around. Maybe I walked in circles. But the cliff walls, the fissure, the instruments, the sequence was too exact. Down to the radio, glowing faintly on the crate, waiting for me like a patient predator. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to tear the tent apart and light it on fire, to defy the repetition. But another part of me, the part trained by decades of data collection, of scientific observation, stopped my hand. If this valley was intelligent, if it was interacting with me, then destroying the evidence meant erasing the only proof I might ever have. So I sat in the snow, shaking, and began to write. Day 4, I muttered aloud, though the calendar in my head had collapsed. My pen scratched over the notebook. Seismic patterns forming letters, mimicry of voice and movement, spatial resets. The words steadied me, even as the air around the camp thickened with an unnatural stillness. My breath fogged and hung in place too long, as though reluctant to dissolve. Then, the crunch of snow. My head snapped up. At the edge of the camp, just within the radius of my lantern, stood the figure again, human-shaped, still as carved obsidian. Only this time it didn't mimic my stance. It raised its arm, slow, deliberate, and pointed at the ground between us. I followed the gesture. The snow cracked open in a thin line, a fissure that stretched like a vein. From it came heat, moist and foul, steaming into the frigid air. I heard the chorus again, rising faintly from beneath, dozens of voices pressing together into one. I forced myself to my feet. My legs quivered, the cold locking into my joints, but I stepped closer. Every nerve screamed at me to run, but I needed to know. I had to know. The voices swelled as I leaned over the crack, my lantern dangling from my gloved hand. The beam illuminated ice walls glistening like slick muscle, and there far below something shifted, a mass moving slow as continents, grinding against itself. The sound wasn't just auditory, it reverberated in my skull. Then it spoke. Not words I understood, but a cadence, a rhythm that pressed against thought. I staggered back, clutching my ears. The notebook slipped from my hand and fell open in the snow. The voices stopped. I looked down and my stomach clenched. The page I'd just written, my notes, my observations, had been altered. The handwriting was mine, unmistakably mine, but the words had changed. Instead of my account, the page now read, "You will stay." I ripped the notebook shut and hurled it into the sled. My lungs heaved in ragged bursts. The figure at the edge of camp tilted its head, then lowered its arm as though satisfied. "No," I croaked, my voice breaking. "I won't. Do you hear me? I won't." The ground pulsed beneath my boots, once, twice, a bass rhythm of disapproval. Snow toppled from the spruce, branches groaning. My lantern flickered. The figure dissolved into shadow again, leaving only the steaming fissure. I knew then that the valley didn't want me to measure it. It didn't want my notes or my probes. It wanted me. And yet, I couldn't leave. I had tried, and it had brought me back. I crouched by the sled, pawing through the gear with frantic, clumsy hands. My fingers closed around the handheld seismograph. I jabbed the probes into the snow near the fissure and watched the paper feed shiver into motion. The line bent, looped, curved again. Words formed, deliberate. Listen. My hands shook so violently the probe wires clattered together. I wanted to run, to tear into the night, but some deep compulsion, professional, obsessive, anchored me. If the valley could speak, then perhaps it could be reasoned with. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice cracking into the silence. The paper quivered, lines scratching violently across the surface, so jagged they tore the sheet. Then, slowly, another word emerged beneath the tears. Below. I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. My breath hitched, clouding the air. It wanted me to go down. The fissure steamed in answer, widening just slightly, enough for me to see deeper into its throat. I imagined myself lowering into that darkness, into the chorus of voices, into the grinding mass that had written my name. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, I can't." But the valley pulsed again. The heartbeat throbbed through the ice, through my chest, into my teeth. My vision blurred with pain. And then I heard it. Not my name this time, not the mimicry of my voice, but my mother's voice. Soft, accented and calling me as she had when I was a boy. "Alikim Jerahaza." My childhood name. "Come home." I dropped to my knees, tears freezing on my cheeks. She had died years ago, and yet her voice wound around me like smoke, seeping into every pore. The fissure steamed harder, the smell of copper rising thick, suffocating. My hands trembled on the seismograph. I knew with a clarity that hollowed me out that the valley didn't just mimic, it reached inside. It found what you loved, what you feared, and fed it back to you. I crawled back from the fissure, dragging the sled blindly, sobbing into the frozen air. My mind felt raw, flayed open. The valley didn't need me to climb down. It was already inside me. When I collapsed in the snow, exhaustion finally dragging me under, I dreamt of vast caverns lit with veins of glowing ice. Shapes moved within, human figures with faces stretched too wide, mouths repeating names over and over, each name dissolving into the next. And at the center, something massive, its body fused with stone, shifting in its sleep. When I woke, the fissure was gone. The snow lay smooth and unbroken, as though nothing had ever split the ground. But the seismograph still hummed faintly, the paper scrolling out a single repeated line. Below, below, below. And beneath my skin, in the marrow of my bones, the heartbeat remained. The morning came without color. The clouds pressed so low I felt I could touch them, and the air was heavy, muted, as though the valley had swallowed the world's sound whole. I sat hunched at the edge of camp, staring at the seismograph's paper still fluttering out its command, below, below, below. I wanted to destroy it, burn the machine, scatter its parts, bury the evidence in the snow. But part of me, the part that had always sought order in chaos, that found beauty in faults and fractures, couldn't let go. If the valley was alive, if it could speak, then it wasn't just a danger. It was a discovery that would rewrite everything. That thought steadied me for only a breath. Because discovery didn't matter if I didn't survive. I forced myself into motion, packed the sled again, though I left the notebook buried in the snow where it lay. I couldn't look at it anymore. Every page now felt compromised, rewritten by something that had no right to my words. As I cinched the harness across my chest, I made a decision. I wouldn't go below. I'd go through. I'd follow the valley until the cliffs broke and light returned, and I'd drag myself into whatever clearing I could find. I'd call the pilot, and if he wouldn't come, I'd start walking until my body gave out. Anything was better than giving myself to the fisher. The first steps were torture. The snow resisted, dragging like wet cement against the sled runners. My breath came in ragged bursts, vapor clouding so thick I had to pause to see. The silence pressed on me, dense and suffocating, broken only by the faint crunch of footsteps behind me, always at the same rhythm as my own. Hours blurred, my legs moved on autopilot, but my mind frayed. At times I swore I saw familiar faces carved into the ice walls, my father, my old professors, colleagues long dead. They stared as I passed, mouths half open like they'd been caught mid-scream. I tried not to look. I tried not to listen. But the voices still rose, at first distant, a murmur beneath the snow like running water, then clearer, threading into words. They called my name again and again from beneath the ice, from within the cliffs. My chest locked tight with panic, and then I saw it. The ground ahead had split wide, not a thin fissure, but a cavern mouth, stretching across the valley floor like a wound. Steam rolled from it, thick and warm against the bitter cold. The smell hit me before I reached the edge. Copper, stone, rot, and something sweet, cloying like fruit left to decay in the sun. The sled jerked as though caught on something. I turned, but nothing snagged the runners. They just wouldn't move forward. The ground pulsed beneath my boots. The heartbeat again. Stronger now, closer, as though I stood on the chest of something immense just beneath the surface. I unhooked the harness, stumbled forward, and peered into the cavern. What I saw nearly broke me. The walls of ice and stone stretched down into a cathedral of shifting light. Veins of crystal pulsed faintly like arteries glowing with dim blue fire. And moving through them, twisting like eels through water, were shapes. Too large to be human, too fluid to be beasts. They undulated through the ice itself, their forms indistinct, sometimes limbs, sometimes wings, sometimes only shadows. The chorus swelled, hundreds of voices colliding into one command, below. My knees buckled. My head throbbed. The words weren't just heard, they were forced through me, vibrating in my marrow. I stumbled back, clutching my ears, though it made no difference. No, I screamed, my throat raw. You won't have me. The paper feed in the seismograph hissed, spitting out a jagged line, letters formed in frantic strokes. You are already ours. The cavern pulsed, and the ground beneath me trembled. Cracks spidered across the snow, radiating out from where I stood. Heat rose through the gaps, searing through my boots. I staggered to the sled, hands fumbling for the signal flare. My training, my profession, my instincts, all screamed at me to do something, anything that would mark resistance. If this thing, this valley, was alive, then I had to prove I wasn't a passive subject. I ripped the flare cap off with my teeth and struck it. The red flame roared to life, a violent burst of human fire against the cold alien glow below. I hurled it into the cavern. The reaction was instant. The ground convulsed, a massive shudder that threw me to my knees. The cavern bellowed, not in words but in rage, deep, primal, so loud it felt like my skull would crack. The shapes in the ice recoiled, writhing like wounded serpents. The glow dimmed, flickered, then surged again, brighter and angrier than before. The heartbeat pounded, violent, shaking snow loose from the cliffs above. Chunks of ice crashed down around me. I scrambled, dragging the sled by raw desperation, pulling until my lungs burned and my muscles tore. The voices rose again, but not in unison. They fractured, overlapping, too many to process. Some screamed, some begged, some laughed, and some whispered, each one a different person I'd known. My mentors, my colleagues, my family. Every voice was a lure, a hook sunk deep into memory. I pressed my palms against my ears and staggered forward. Blood trickled from my nose, freezing against my upper lip. My vision swam. Then, ahead, I saw something impossible. A light. Not the dim glow of the valley's veins, but sharp, white, cutting through the mist. For one delirious moment, I thought it was the helicopter, that the pilot had returned, impossibly to pluck me out of this nightmare. I dragged myself toward it, legs numb, chest on fire. The sled felt weightless behind me, though I knew it hadn't lessened. My body simply stopped caring. As I stumbled into the glow, I realized what it was. Not the helicopter, not salvation, a lantern. My own lantern, sitting on the crate by the tent. I was back at camp. Again. The valley had reset me. My scream tore through the night, ragged and broken, echoing off the cliffs. I tore at the tent, flung the crate into the snow, smashed the lantern until shards glittered in the firelight. But even as I destroyed them, I knew it meant nothing. The valley would remake it. It would reset me. And beneath it all, the heartbeat went on. I collapsed in the snow, staring at the black sky. My breath came in shallow bursts. I realized then that I couldn't win. I couldn't leave. But maybe I could outlast it. I crawled to the seismograph, fingers numb, and began to write across the paper feed in bold strokes, my pen cutting deep into the surface. I will not go below. I fed the paper back into the machine, forced it under the rollers. If the valley could write, then maybe it could read. Maybe it could know defiance. For a moment, silence. Then the paper scrolled again. Slow, deliberate. We will see. The letters bled across the page like wounds, and the heartbeat quickened. The valley was no longer patient. The ground pulsed with such force that my teeth rattled, and the air itself trembled like water under a bow. The words on the seismograph bled into one another until the page tore down the middle, spitting paper curls into the snow. We will see. It echoed inside me long after the words were gone. I staggered to my feet, every bone aching, my body hollowed by fatigue. The tent was whole again, the crate upright, the lantern repaired. I hadn't touched them, but they waited, set in perfect order like a stage reset after a performance. And I was the actor, condemned to repeat. I knew then that destruction was meaningless here. The valley would always reset. The only thing it couldn't erase was me, my will, my choices. If I could bend those into something it didn't expect, maybe I could force a fracture in its control. But what could defy a thing older than glaciers, something that breathed through stone and wrote in earthquakes? I sank to my knees in the snow, pressing my palms against the ground. It thrummed beneath me, slow and heavy, like an organ playing one endless note. The heartbeat, the endless reminder. My training whispered through the terror. Listen, measure, observe. That was all I had ever done. So I listened. At first, only the steady rhythm. But then I noticed the pattern. The thuds weren't random. They came in intervals, measured, precise. Long, short, long. A code. I snatched up the notebook I had tried to abandon. My hands shook as I marked the beats with crude dots and dashes. It was language, not seismic noise, not hallucination. Language. The page filled with crude lines until the message became clear. Stay. Belong. Below. I froze. My throat locked. The valley wasn't just telling me, it was demanding, each pulse an imperative. My pencil snapped between my fingers. The air felt too thin to breathe. I forced myself to respond, carving into the snow with the broken pencil tip. No. For a moment, silence. The ground held its breath. Then the heartbeat accelerated, furious, rattling through the ice. Steam hissed from fresh cracks. The tent collapsed inward, though no wind blew. My sled jerked as if yanked by unseen hands. The voices rose again, layered and relentless. My mother, my father, my colleagues, my own voice, all calling from below. They begged, commanded, mocked, pleaded. I pressed my hands over my ears and screamed until my throat tore, but the voices poured through skin, through bone. And then another fissure opened. Not small this time. not a teasing wound, but a gaping maw tearing across the valley floor, splitting my camp in two. Heat rushed out, rolling over me in waves. My breath fogged crimson as the air itself scalded my lungs. I stumbled back, staring down into the chasm. The cavern below churned with movement, shapes writhing like veins of smoke, weaving in and out of glowing ice. The chorus swelled, pressing against my skull, chanting my name. Elias. 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 My body wanted to collapse into it, to throw myself into the heat, to let the valley swallow me whole. But a spark of defiance kept me upright. I had one chance. One desperate gamble. The seismograph still hummed on the snow. I grabbed it, tore the paper free, and jammed the probe wires together, forcing a surge of static through the feed. Sparks spat into the air, the machine screeching. I held the jagged paper high, screaming into the fissure with everything left in me. No, you will not have me. For a heartbeat, the valley froze. The voices faltered, the glow dimmed, the cavern stilled, and then it roared. The ground bucked beneath me, throwing me into the snow. Ice shattered from the cliffs, raining down in slabs. The fissure widened, stretching toward me like a hungry throat. I scrambled on hands and knees, the sled tumbling beside me. The heartbeat thundered faster, so loud I thought my chest would split apart. Then, silence. Everything stopped. The heartbeat. The voices. Even the wind. The fissure closed with a sound like the world snapping shut. I lay sprawled in the snow, gasping, staring at the pale sky. My ears rang with the absence of sound. My chest heaved, waiting for the next pulse, the next demand. But none came. The valley was still. I staggered to my feet, body trembling. The tent was gone, the sled gone, the lantern gone, the camp erased. Only the snow remained, smooth and unbroken, as though none of it had ever existed. I was alone. For hours, or maybe minutes, I stumbled forward, no destination in mind, only movement. My compass spun uselessly, my GPS blank. The cliffs slowly fell away, the valley widening, and then, impossibly, I saw the tree line thinning into a clearing. Above it, a sliver of sky. Real sky. My knees buckled. I crawled the last stretch, dragging myself out of the valley's throat. The trees gave way to a ridge, and beyond it, I saw the frozen tundra stretching in endless white. The horizon was sharp, unbroken, honest. I collapsed there, sobbing, my face pressed into the snow. The heartbeat was gone, the voices gone, only the ragged sound of my breath remained. But as I pushed myself upright, wiping the ice from my face, I noticed something. The seismograph. It lay in the snow beside me. I hadn't carried it out. I hadn't even seen it when the camp vanished. But there it was, its feed spitting one final line across the paper, steady and deliberate. We will wait. The wind lifted the page, carrying it across the tundra. I didn't chase it. I didn't move at all, because I knew, with a certainty deeper than the bones of the earth itself, that the valley had not released me. It had simply let me go. For now. And in the marrow of my bones, beneath the silence of the tundra, the heartbeat still whispered faintly, patient as stone. I don't remember how long I stayed on that ridge, staring out across the tundra. The wind carried no sound, no scent, nothing of the valley behind me. But I didn't trust it. Every second I expected to feel the ground pulse again, to hear the whisper of my name slipping up through the snow. When I finally stood, my legs felt brittle, as though one wrong move would splinter them like dry twigs. The sled was gone. My instruments gone. Only the seismograph remained, sitting in the snow like a gift, or a warning. I considered leaving it behind, abandoning every trace of this nightmare. But my hands moved on their own, lifting the machine, cradling it to my chest like it was a child. If the valley wanted me to carry it, I wouldn't give it the satisfaction. I told myself it was evidence. Proof. The one thing that made me more than just a madman babbling about voices in the ice. The horizon stretched endless and white. I had no food, no tent, no navigation. Just the thin sliver of instinct that told me to keep moving. That somewhere out there was a chance, a rescue, a clearing, something that wasn't alive in ways it shouldn't be. I walked until the sky dimmed again, until shadows spilled long across the tundra. My breath rasped, shallow and painful. Every step dragged. My body had nothing left, only momentum, only a will I wasn't sure belonged to me anymore. When I collapsed, it was beside a jagged ridge of stone breaking through the snow like the spine of some buried beast. I curled into myself, clutching the seismograph, and let sleep take me. And that's when I heard it again. Not the valley, not the cavern, the helicopter, the rhythmic thrum of rotors cutting the sky. I bolted upright, head spinning, vision blurry. The sound grew louder, cutting through the wind. I stumbled to my feet, waving my arms, screaming until my throat tore raw. The helicopter crested the ridge, its lights blazing against the dimming sky. I wept as it descended. The door slid open and the pilot leaned out, his goggles catching the light. He shouted something I couldn't hear over the roar. Strong hands pulled me inside, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, shoved a flask against my lips. The taste of hot liquid burned down my throat, real and human. The pilot's voice was steady, grounding. "Jesus, Varga, thought we'd lost you." I couldn't answer. I couldn't even look at him. I clutched the seismograph to my chest and stared out the window as the valley shrank beneath us, swallowed by darkness. The tundra stretched forever, but I knew the valley wasn't gone. It was only waiting, coiled beneath the ice, patient as stone. Days later, weeks maybe, I found myself back in Anchorage, sitting in a sterile office under buzzing fluorescent lights. They'd taken my vitals, scanned me, stitched me back into the world of the living. But when they asked what had happened, I couldn't speak. How do you tell anyone that a valley wrote your name, that it wore your mother's voice, your own stance, your colleagues' laughter, that it spoke in the heartbeat of the earth and demanded you crawl into its throat? So I told them I was disoriented, that I'd gotten turned around in the storm, that hypothermia had made me hallucinate. They accepted it. They wanted to accept it. But I didn't. At night, in the sterile bed of the recovery ward, I dreamt of the fissure opening again, of the voices chanting below, of the paper feeding endlessly from the seismograph, curling across the floor, spelling my name until the letters lost meaning. I kept the machine hidden under my cot. No one asked. They were just glad I was alive. It's been weeks now, maybe months. I don't trust time anymore. The city hums around me, cars, voices, electricity, but sometimes in the still hours before dawn, I feel it again. A faint tremor, not enough to rattle glass or shift the floor, just enough to pulse through me, like a hand pressing from beneath my ribs. The seismograph answers. It's paper scrolls without my touch, letters bending across the feed. Always the same message. We will wait. I've stopped sleeping, stopped eating. My colleagues think I'm still recovering. They talk about sending me home to Budapest, about rest, about time with family. They don't understand. There is no home anymore. Not for me. The valley is inside me. Sometimes I wonder if I ever left, if I'm still lying in the snow, curled by the fissure, dreaming this life. If the helicopter was just another mimic, another trick to lure me deeper. I try not to think about it, but every time the ground shakes, even when it's just a truck passing outside or a door slamming down the hall, I hear it again. The chorus rising, the voices threading into one. Elias, Elias. And I know, with a certainty sharper than ice, that one day I will go back. Not because I choose to, but because the valley is patient and stone never forgets. I am Elias Varga, former reconnaissance team leader for Argentina's Special Forces, now a contracted operative for high-risk environmental surveys. I've been deployed to northern Sweden on a solo mission. Officially, it's to investigate reports of missing hikers in the remote taiga near Kiruna. Unofficially, I suspect something deeper, something the local authorities refuse to speak about. I'm disciplined, calm, and trained to survive in extreme conditions. But even I can feel the tension in the air the moment I step out of the helicopter. The forest here is thick, oppressive. Spruce and pine trees rise like cathedral columns, their trunks slick with moss and the damp of countless summer rains. The scent is pungent, almost choking. Wet earth, rotting leaves, and the metallic tang of blood that I can't quite place. Mist rises from hidden bogs, curling around my boots as if the forest itself is breathing. The air is so cold it bites through my jacket, chilling my lungs with every inhale. Despite the late summer sun barely dipping toward the horizon, the forest is already draped in shadow. Everything is quiet, too quiet, but there's movement. The wind shifts. A branch snaps somewhere beyond my line of sight, and my instincts tingle. I move carefully along a narrow path, my boots sinking slightly into moss and mud. My senses are sharp, trained to detect anomalies. The faint crunch of distant leaves, the irregular rhythm of a branch snapping under weight. I notice immediately that the footprints in the mud ahead are inconsistent. Human, yes, but elongated, distorted, as if someone, or something, walked on toes that bend wrong. I pause, crouch, and inspect the tracks. My mind calculates inconsistent stride, weight distribution off, depth uneven. My pulse quickens, but only slightly. This is why I'm here. I know how to read the forest. I know how to anticipate danger. I continue deeper. Sunlight sifts through the canopy in thin beams, catching motes of dust and pollen that float like tiny specters. The air feels alive, charged, almost humming with anticipation. Occasionally I catch a glimpse of movement, a shadow at the edge of my vision, but when I turn, nothing is there. My breathing remains steady, though I tighten my grip on my M4. In my experience, creatures of instinct can be hunted. Creatures of intelligence can hunt you. Hours pass. The forest seems endless. I reach a clearing, a frozen bog with water so dark it mirrors the trees like black glass. I notice something unsettling. The reflection is subtly wrong. A branch behind me shifts, but the reflection lags or perhaps moves independently. My throat tightens. I shake my head. Overactive imagination? Long hours alone? I tell myself yes, but deep down, I know the forest is watching. I set up a temporary observation post near a cluster of jagged rocks. From this vantage, I can see the faint trail leading deeper into the woods, the trail that doesn't make sense. As I settle in, I pull out my night vision monocular. The green tint shows the forest differently, alien. Shapes twist and shift, branches seem to reach, then I see it, movement. At first, I think it's a deer. No, too deliberate, too measured. It steps with a cautious intelligence, scanning, observing me even though I am perfectly still. Its form is low to the ground, but disturbingly humanoid in posture. I can't quite see its face, but the tilt of its head, the slow, deliberate movement, it's calculating. I freeze. My mind races, recalling past encounters in hostile territory, war zones, ambushes, traps. But nothing prepared me for this. It doesn't charge. It doesn't flee. It simply watches. The air is thick, heavy, almost tangible. My instincts scream at me to retreat, but I remain calm. I can't afford panic. I am trained to analyze, to survive. I begin to whisper coordinates into my radio, just in case, though I know there's no reception here. My words echo in the hollow silence swallowed by the trees. Hours blur as the forest seems to close around me. Sounds shift unnaturally. My own footsteps echo before I take them, like branches crack behind me but vanish when I turn. I see glimpses of the creature, a shadow between trunks, a movement in the corner of my eye. It's testing me, I realize. Observing my patterns, predicting my reactions. I adjust my path carefully, making wide, unpredictable loops, staying off the obvious trail. It follows. I know it follows. Night descends with a strange, oppressive heaviness. The forest is no longer simply quiet, it is anticipatory. Even trained eyes can't distinguish shadows from movement. The fog thickens, wrapping around me like fingers. My breathing is steady, but my mind races. I set traps, small snare-like devices, tripwires tied to rocks and branches, not because I expect to catch it, but because I need to see its reaction, to measure its intelligence. The creature approaches each one cautiously, examining, circling, almost mocking. I catch a scent, something coppery, iron-rich. Blood? I look around. Nothing. Then a low, guttural sound, human-like but wrong. My pulse spikes. The creature doesn't attack. It doesn't flee. It's playing a game, one I did not choose but must survive. My hands tighten on my weapon, my training taking over. I plan, I calculate, I anticipate. I know it can read body language, so I move silently, unpredictably. Then, from the fog ahead, it emerges fully, tall, hunched, sinewy, its limbs impossibly long. The face, I can't describe. Human, beast, both in the same instant. Its eyes glint with intelligence, awareness, and something darker, a recognition of me, not just my presence, but my thoughts, my strategies. I feel exposed, vulnerable, and yet I cannot allow fear to dominate. I focus, observation, prediction, patience, survival. Hours stretch, my traps are dismantled, my path anticipated, yet I remain. I find temporary safety in a hollowed tree, its roots curling like protective claws. I catch my breath, listen to the forest, the subtle sounds, the shifting shadows, the unnatural silence between rustling leaves. It is here, always here, watching, waiting. I don't know if I will leave this forest alive, but I know one thing: the intelligence I face is not animal. It is cunning, deliberate, almost human, but not human enough. I am part of its game now, a player I did not agree to join, and the forest is alive with it. I wake to the scent of wet earth and something else, something metallic, sour, crawling through the mist like a living pulse. My hands tighten around my M4, eyes scanning the hollowed tree I've taken as shelter. The fog is thick now, crawling along the ground, rising from the bogs like a silent tide. I can feel it pressing against my skin, chilling every nerve ending, wrapping around my chest, making breathing a conscious effort. Movement. A shadow passes just beyond my temporary refuge. My body goes rigid. I've been trained for hostile tourneys and war itself, but this is something else. I know I am being watched. I've felt it since the moment I entered this forest, but now the sense is suffocating, undeniable. There is intelligence here, malicious, cunning, patient. I imagine the creature circling me like a predator studying prey, measuring reactions, calculating weaknesses. I step outside the hollow, keeping low. My boots sink into moss, the wet undergrowth dampening my movements. Every instinct screams caution. The fog is alive, dancing with shadows, teasing me with shapes that vanish when I focus on them. The forest smells different now. More acidic, a faint hint of decay beneath the pine. Something has been here recently. Something larger than me, more deliberate than any animal. I take a wide loop around the clearing, scanning, listening. The tracks I noticed yesterday are gone or altered. I crouch to examine the mud. My footprints have been erased, deliberately. Not by nature, not by wind or rain, but by something intelligent. My pulse rises. This is no ordinary predator. I realize with a sinking certainty that it has been observing me from the moment I arrived, anticipating my movements, predicting my survival patterns. I set another trap, small, improvised, using wire and deadfall. Nothing lethal. It's more for observation, for baiting the creature into revealing its thought process. I retreat to a high vantage point, climbing a sturdy pine whose roots sink deep into the mossy ground. From here, I can see the forest floor, the winding path through the trees. Hours pass, silence. Then a flicker of motion, too fast, too deliberate. My eyes follow it, but the fog swallows it before I can identify it. And then it speaks. Not words, not language I recognize, but a sound, guttural, human-like, mocking. My stomach tightens. I've been in ambushes before, under fire from trained soldiers, in hostile territories where survival hinged on reading every micro-expression, every twitch, every instinct. This is different. It knows me. It is aware of my experience, my tactics, and perhaps it is toying with me. I realize with chilling clarity that this forest is no longer just a setting. It is a weapon, a maze crafted by an intelligence far beyond what I've encountered. I descend carefully, silent as a shadow. My path is erratic, unpredictable, circling back to confuse whatever is following me. My mind races through contingencies, escape routes, ambush strategies, traps, decoys. But the forest offers no refuge. Every branch, every shadow, every rustle feels deliberate, arranged, and the longer I stay, the more I feel the creature learning, adapting. Then I see it again, emerging from a cluster of trees low to the ground, sinewy limbs moving with a grace no human or animal could replicate. Its head tilts unnaturally, and the mist curls around it like smoke. Its eyes, two dark pools of knowing, lock onto mine. I can almost hear its thoughts: curiosity, calculation, hunger. I freeze, evaluating. Retreat would be predictable. Attack would be reckless. The creature seems to grin, or at least the angle of its distorted mouth suggests it. It stalks closer, each step measured, almost ceremonial. I move. Not forward, not backward, sideways, unpredictable. I take advantage of the terrain, the bogs, the uneven ground. My training kicks in. Observation, anticipation, adaptability. I throw a small rock to my left to test its reaction. It twitches, head snapping toward the sound, then turns back, circling me, almost dancing around the trap I set earlier. I can feel its amusement, its superiority. It is smarter than I imagined. The night deepens. Darkness is no longer absence of light, but a physical presence pressing against my senses. Every sound is amplified. The snap of a branch, the drip of water, the soft exhale of my own breathing. The creature is everywhere and nowhere. I hear movement above me, branches bending, leaves rustling, and I spin, M4 raised. Nothing. Then, a low sigh, not carried by the wind, but directly from the fog behind me. I spin again. Still nothing. My heartbeat thunders. I realize it is toying with me, learning my reactions, predicting them. My pulse slows, and I force myself to think clearly. Every action, every decision is deliberate. I cannot panic. I cannot misstep. I must become unpredictable. My training becomes my shield. The strategies I've rehearsed, the instincts honed over years of high-stakes missions, all converge into a single focus: survival. Hours or minutes, I cannot tell, pass. I find a narrow trench between two rocky outcrops, partially hidden by moss and low-hanging branches. I crouch there, still as the forest itself. The creature passes within meters, its low growl vibrating through the mist. I can see it clearly now, sinewy, long-limbed, almost human in posture, yet grotesque, alien. Its face is twisted, a mockery of humanity, yet eerily intelligent. It sniffs the air, it tilts its head, and then vanishes into the fog as if it were never there. I exhale slowly, muscles trembling, mind racing. I realize that this is not merely a predator. It is an apex intelligence, a hunter who has turned the environment itself into a weapon. I am trapped, alone, and every instinct I rely upon to survive is being tested against an entity that can anticipate, adapt, and manipulate. As dawn approaches, I make a decision. I will retreat, but I will do so carefully, methodically. The forest will not give me an easy exit. I gather my minimal gear, check my weapon, and move silently, constantly scanning, listening, calculating. Every shadow could conceal it. Every rustle could be an ambush. And yet, despite the fear gnawing at the edges of my mind, a cold, rational focus sets in. This is survival, pure and simple. Observation, adaptation, patience. I move through the forest, leaving deceptive footprints circling, doubling back, always keeping the creature in my peripheral vision. It appears at intervals just beyond sight, taunting, studying, but never attacking directly. Hours, or what feels like hours, later I reach the edge of a frozen bog where the forest thins slightly. I pause, listening. Silence. For the first time in hours, the oppressive presence feels distant, though I know better than to assume safety. I will survive today. But I also know the truth. This forest is alive with it. It watches, it learns, it waits. And I am not the first, nor will I be the last to be ensnared in its patient, intelligent hunt. The creature has not left, it will never leave, and I, Elias Varga, am merely the latest shadow in its endless game. By the time night falls again, my senses are stretched taut. The forest has become a living entity, pressing against me from all sides. I am Elias Varga, trained for ambush, for combat, for surviving impossible odds, but this is something new, something that doesn't follow logic, doesn't fight fair. It is intelligent, patient, malicious. I move cautiously through the moss-covered undergrowth, keeping low. My body is tired, but adrenaline sharpens every nerve. The creature has been shadowing me since dawn, appearing and disappearing with uncanny timing. Every step I take, every breath I exhale, it seems to anticipate. I know that one wrong move could end me. I reach the edge of a narrow creek, water dark and cold, moving silently under a thin layer of fog. It seems like a possible escape route, a natural barrier that might slow whatever is hunting me. I pause, listening. Silence, then the subtle snap of a branch across the water, faint but deliberate. I freeze. There it is. The creature steps into view, its form emerging from the mist like smoke given shape. It is taller than any human, sinewy, almost skeletal, with limbs that bend in impossible angles. Its face is a grotesque parody of humanity, a mask of intelligence and cruelty. Its eyes, black pools of calculation, lock onto mine. I can feel it assessing me, testing my reaction, reading my instincts. I grip my M4 and fire a warning shot. The sound echoes through the trees, bouncing off trunks, scattering birds into the fog. The creature flinches, but only slightly, and then moves closer. It is not afraid, not even cautious. It understands me. My pulse accelerates, but I force myself to breathe evenly, to stay in control. Panic is the enemy here. Observation, adaptation, patience. These are my weapons. I retreat along the creek, making deliberate, unpredictable movements, ducking behind fallen logs and rocks. The creature follows, silent and calculating. It is faster than any human, more precise than any animal I've encountered. Its presence is everywhere and nowhere at once. I realize that traps and decoys will only delay the inevitable. Survival depends on improvisation and exploiting the terrain, anything to gain a slight advantage. I spot a large, hollowed tree at the creek's edge, a possible temporary refuge. I sprint toward it, the creature matching my pace with uncanny ease. I dive inside, pressing against the damp, rough bark. My chest heaves, muscles trembling, mind racing. Outside, I hear it moving, scraping, sniffing, testing the hollow. It pauses, then withdraws. The silence is deafening. I wait, calculating. Then footsteps fade into the fog. Minutes pass, then hours. I am still. Every sense alert, but nothing. I dare not move until the forest itself seems to exhale, releasing a tension I didn't realize I'd been holding. My body is exhausted, my mind frayed, but I cannot rest. Not yet. Survival is a matter of seconds, and seconds in this forest stretch into eternity. I slip out of the hollowed tree and continue along the creek, moving slowly, deliberately. My eyes catch movement ahead, slight, almost imperceptible. The creature is there, crouched in the fog, watching me with a patience that makes my skin crawl. It tilts its head, and in that moment I see something horrifying. It is imitating me. Small gestures, movements I had made without thought, now mirrored perfectly by this entity. It learns. It adapts. It is becoming me, in a grotesque echo of my own body. Panic flares, but I suppress it. I am trained to survive. I am Elias Varga. I think, I plan, I act. I reach a narrow ravine, steep on both sides, with thick roots and boulders forming a precarious path. The creature follows. I make a split-second decision. I kick loose a boulder, sending it tumbling into the fog below. The sound echoes, and the creature halts, momentarily uncertain. I use the moment to sprint along the ravine, scrambling over roots and rocks, adrenaline carrying me farther than fatigue should allow. It recovers instantly. I hear the soft, deliberate thud of its movements behind me. Faster, closer. I glance back and see it emerge from the mist, every movement calculated, every step a measured response to mine. Its grin, or whatever approximates a grin, chills me to the bone. I find a partially collapsed cabin along the creek's edge, its walls rotten and sagging, the roof caving in places. It is a relic, abandoned decades ago. I slip inside, barricading the door with a rotting beam. The smell of damp wood and mold fills the air. I crouch low, weapon ready, listening. The creature arrives moments later. I hear it circling outside, tapping the walls, sniffing the air, its presence a constant weight against the thin barrier of wood. I whisper into my radio, though I know no one is listening. Coordinates, status, survival plan. Nothing. Just the static hiss of isolation. It pauses. I can feel it. Almost human, almost thoughtful. Then it scratches at the door, long, deliberate strokes. I hold my breath. The sound echoes in the small cabin. My mind races, calculating, improvising. I must escape. There is only one chance. I wait for it to pause, then slip through a side opening, half-rotted and unnoticed, into the mist outside. The fog swallows me immediately. I move silently, unpredictably, retracing my path through the forest in a zigzag pattern, doubling back to mislead it. Hours pass. My muscles ache, my lungs burn, my mind screams for rest. Then I see a clearing. Moonlight filters weakly through the fog, reflecting off the creek. Safety? Perhaps, but I know better. The creature is intelligent, patient, persistent. It will not leave me alone. I sprint across the clearing, following a path that seems less traveled, guided by instinct, by the faint hope of survival. I reach the edge of a small airstrip, a forgotten clearing for emergency landings, overgrown with moss and trees, but enough open space for extraction. My heart leaps. I radio for pickup. The sound of my own voice feels alien after hours of silence. I hear the helicopter in the distance. Relief surges, but immediately I feel it. The shadow, the presence, the weight of eyes in the fog. I board the helicopter, heart hammering, body trembling, eyes scanning the tree line. As we lift off, I catch a glimpse of it. Crouched at the edge of the clearing, watching, waiting, a silhouette in the mist. Its form is impossible to forget, a memory burned into my vision. Its intelligence is clear. It knows I survived today. It will wait for the next mistake. The forest recedes below us, endless, silent, but I know it is not empty. I am alive, but only temporarily. The creature still hunts, it still watches, it still exists in the shadows of this northern taiga. Patient, intelligent, unstoppable. I lean against the cold metal of the helicopter, staring at the forest below. My mind races. The memory of its eyes, its movements, its mocking intelligence will follow me forever. The forest has claimed another story, another shadow. I survived, but the game is far from over. And deep in the fog, somewhere below, I know it is waiting. My name is Mateo Arriaga, 39 years old, geologist. People often think our profession is all maps and numbers, little pins in rocks, and paperwork in air-conditioned labs. But geology demands presence. You can't understand the earth from behind glass. You need to put your boots into it, let the dust cling to your skin, hear how the ground itself breathes. That's why I'm here, high in the Chilean Andes, long after most would have turned back. The Institute in Mendoza had asked me to retrieve a cache of old seismic recordings from a monitoring station that had been abandoned in the 1980s. On paper, the mission was routine: collect the sealed canisters, check the state of the instruments, and return before the weather shifted. But paper is one thing. Standing here, with thin air burning my lungs and the wind threading icy knives through every seam in my jacket, I realized how abandoned meant something else entirely in places like this. Abandoned wasn't just emptiness. It was a scar. The climb had been difficult even for me, someone who'd spent his life in rough terrain. Loose shale crumbled under every step, echoing down the gorge as if the mountain kept count of my progress. The sky was a colorless dome, light drained out, the kind of pallor that made you feel the sun had retreated behind an iron curtain. My breath tasted metallic, and my ears ached from the pressure of altitude. I told myself this was normal. A geologist understands pressure, after all. But there was something more in it, the way each gust of wind carried not just cold, but a tone, low and stretched, like the strings of a cello vibrating in stone. At first, I thought it was fatigue. A mind too long without rest can summon ghosts. But then, as I trudged toward the station's silhouette against the ridgeline, I heard something cut through the gust. A voice, a man's voice. My name, Mateo, drawn long and soft, almost respectful, as if the mountain itself had learned how to speak it. I froze, my boot balanced on a ledge. There was no one here. No expedition team, no shepherd, not even a bird overhead. My pulse hammered in my throat, threatening to choke me. But instinct, my rational, trained instinct, told me to look for a source, not surrender to fear. Echoes could do strange things at high altitude. Sound traveled unpredictably in canyons. That had to be it. Still, I kept climbing faster, every muscle tensing as if bracing for an unseen pursuit. The monitoring station revealed itself slowly, a squat concrete structure half buried in snowdrifts, windows blind with ice, an antenna bent at an angle like a broken limb. A blackened doorway yawned open. The place stank faintly of rust and mineral dampness, as though the rocks themselves had seeped into the walls. I stepped inside, boots crunching on frost. My flashlight beam flicked across abandoned bunks, a rusted kettle, stacks of warped paper. Shadows leapt in every corner, refusing to settle. I forced my breathing steady. Collect the canisters. That's all, I muttered aloud, the sound of my own voice anchoring me. I found the storage cabinet where the recordings should be. Inside were 3 sealed steel cylinders, surprisingly intact. I reached for the first, and then froze again. From the far end of the corridor, another voice whispered, this one sharper, feminine, like a warning. Don't. The beam of my flashlight quivered over peeling paint. Empty hallway. Empty air. That's when I realized what unsettled me most. It wasn't just the voices, it was the tone. They didn't echo like natural sounds. They resonated in the same way seismic waves did, deep, layered, as if rising out of the bedrock itself. The mountain wasn't just amplifying sound, it was producing it. And it knew my name. I tried to shake it off. Fatigue, thin air, maybe even auditory hallucinations. I'd read about those. Mountaineers hearing phantom bells, desert wanderers convinced someone trailed behind them. But the voices hadn't just been random. They had said my name, twice. And they hadn't come from my head. They had shape, direction, resonance, the kind of timbre my trained ear knew belonged to something vibrating through matter. I pressed the steel canister to my chest for a moment. The cold of the metal steadied me. The cylinders were heavier than I expected, each containing rolls of magnetic tape wound tight, relics of a research generation before mine. If they had been abandoned up here, perhaps the scientists had heard something too. Perhaps they had left because of it. The corridor stretched deeper into the mountain where rock had been blasted to form storage alcoves. I should have turned back then, 3 canisters in hand, but curiosity gnawed at me like hunger. The rational part of me said, get out, descend before the storm moves in. But the obsessive part, that streak that had carried me into geoscience in the first place, wanted to understand. Sound doesn't simply appear in stone. If there was resonance, then something beneath was moving. I adjusted my headlamp, its beam slicing through ice crystals in the air, and stepped deeper. The silence between gusts was enormous, pressing against my eardrums like water. Then came a faint rhythm, tap, 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 like a knuckle against hollow steel. My heart lurched. I swung the beam toward the sound and saw nothing but jagged walls glittering with frost. The tapping stopped, but a new tone began, so low I felt it more than heard it, a vibration through my boots, through the air, making my teeth buzz. Seismic, subbasal, the same frequencies that ripple before tectonic movement, and threaded inside that vibration as if shaped deliberately was another word. Not my name this time. A phrase, in Spanish. Clearer than before. No mires abajo, don't look down. I nearly dropped the canister. The voice wasn't warning me, it was commanding me, as if it knew exactly where I stood on the fractured corridor floor, right above the hollow where the mountain had been carved away. My breath quickened, fogging before my eyes. Instinct told me to obey, but rationality bit back. Sound has no intent. It can't know me. It can't command me. I forced myself to angle the lamp downward. The floor ahead sagged ever so slightly. Hairline cracks spidered outward. Beneath them, blackness. Not shadows, an actual gap, perhaps an old shaft or vent carved during the station's construction. My stomach flipped. If I'd taken 2 more steps, the ice-thin slab might have collapsed. My pulse hammered with adrenaline. Gracias, I muttered without thinking, a reflex, and immediately regretted it, because the vibration that followed almost sounded like laughter. I retreated back toward the cabinet, clutching the canisters like lifelines. I needed to leave. Rational investigation could not compete with a phenomenon that twisted both geology and cognition. Whatever these echoes were, they weren't just byproducts of stone. Something in this mountain was awake. Something that could mimic warning or lure or mock. At the doorway, I paused. Outside, snow hissed across the ridge, the wind shrieking as though in protest of my retreat. I secured the canisters in my pack, cinched the straps, and stepped out into the storm. The ridge had grown treacherous, a slick white sheet over unstable rock. My crampons bit into ice, each step slow, deliberate. But as I descended, the sound followed me. Not just voices now, but overlapping tones, a dozen frequencies weaving in and out of each other, almost forming language. Some in Spanish, some in tongues I didn't recognize. Always behind me, always pressing close, carried by the wind, yet somehow inside my skull. I tried focusing on survival details: heel down, weight low, breathe steadily. That's what a geologist does: applies process, uses observation, not panic. But every rational thought was eroded by that soundscape, those voices that swelled and receded like tides. By the time I reached a narrow ledge halfway down the ridge, my legs shook. I pressed against the rock wall, sucking thin air, when I noticed something carved into the stone at shoulder height. Words, shallow but unmistakable. English this time, letters weathered but legible. Don't listen. The chisel marks were old, decades at least, perhaps from one of the original researchers. My gloved fingers traced the grooves. The warning vibrated inside me more than the storm did, but it was already too late. I had listened, and the voices, if they were voices, knew it. For now, I huddled under a shallow overhang, forcing myself to close my eyes, to slow my breath, to cling to the rational world. But beneath the earth, I swear I felt movement. Not seismic shifts, not landslides, footsteps, slow, deliberate, climbing toward me through the stone itself. The rock under my gloves thrummed like the body of a vast instrument. Each pulse was subtle, but the pattern was deliberate, too steady for random seismic noise. I'd spent my career reading the language of Earth: tremor, pressure, fracture. This was no tremor. It was a cadence, a rhythm, like a heart or footsteps echoing up through the bedrock. I told myself to move. The ledge was only a temporary refuge. The storm above was worsening, a fine grit of ice cutting sideways through the air. My pack, heavy with the canisters, dragged at my shoulders, but I couldn't bring myself to leave them. They might hold answers, or at least prove that this wasn't a hallucination. I clipped my carabiner to the old anchor drilled into the ridge and began edging along the rock face. Each movement was mechanical, drilled in survival practice: shift weight, test ice, plant crampon, exhale. But my mind kept drifting to the voices. They'd shifted again, no longer warning, no longer mocking. Now they were coaxing. A low murmur, a soft undertone like a lullaby sung through 1,000 meters of basalt. My headlamp beam flicked across a fracture in the ridge, and something flickered back, a pale glimmer, just for an instant, as if the stone itself had opened an eye. My heart slammed against my ribs. I snapped the beam back. Nothing. Only frost-glazed rock. "Altitude sickness," I whispered. But my own voice sounded alien in my ears. Thin, weak. I forced myself down another 5 meters. The trail curved into a shallow gulch where the wind dulled and snow settled thicker. My boots sank to the ankles. It should have felt safer, sheltered from the gale. Instead, the silence was heavier. No wind, no movement, just a faint ringing in my ears. No, not ringing, humming, coming from the snow itself. I crouched, scraping a glove through the drift. Underneath the top layer was bare rock, faintly warm to the touch. Warm. At this altitude, in this storm. Impossible. My training kicked in, cataloging possibilities: geothermal vent, subglacial conduit, residual heat from a fumarole, but I smelled no sulfur, no steam, only the sterile mineral cold of stone. And then the hum rose into words. Mateo. Clearer than ever. Directly beneath my boots, like a voice through a floorboard. I stumbled back, crampons scraping sparks on stone. My breath came short and sharp. I swung my headlamp in frantic arcs across the gulch. No movement, no figure, just me and the mountain. Yet the voice had been right there, intimate as a whisper in my ear. I clutched at logic like a lifeline. Resonance travels along fault lines. Temperature gradients cause vibration, but no equation accounted for my name spoken in perfect cadence from beneath solid rock. Another pulse. This one deeper, rattling the loose stones around me. Then, silence. I had to get out. Now. I turned back toward the ridge, but something stopped me. Tracks, in the snow. Not mine. Not any animals I recognized. Too long, too narrow, as if a heel had dragged. They led from the fissure I'd been standing on toward the far side of the gulch where the snow deepened into a shadowed overhang. The tracks sank deep, each step perfectly spaced, vanishing into the dark. My rational mind said, no. The snow drifts. Shadows mislead. Those are your own prints distorted by wind. But my gut knew better. They weren't mine. They were coming toward me from inside the mountain. The voices returned, not one now, but many, overlapping like waves colliding. Male, female, child, Spanish, English languages I couldn't place, all of them in the same tone, all of them carrying my name. I ripped the ice axe from my pack, hands trembling, an absurd weapon against a sound, but holding it grounded me, gave my muscles a purpose. My lamp beam jittered over the overhang where the tracks vanished. Nothing but darkness, so black it seemed to swallow the light. Then movement. Not a shape, a distortion. Like the air itself was bending. The snow slumped inward as if something enormous pressed against it from below. The voices swelled, overlapping, building to a crescendo of meaningless words, except for one phrase repeated in every tongue, "Come down." My legs locked. My heart pounded so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to run but back across a narrow ledge into a blizzard. The overhang bulged again, snow sliding off in sheets. I did what a geologist does when a slope moves. I tested the ground. I jammed the axe into the drift near the fissure. It went in far deeper than it should, straight through snow, through a brittle crust of ice, into a void, a hollow cavity beneath the gulch. The hum rose, rattling up the shaft of the axe into my gloves. "Mateo," the voices chorused, almost tender. "Home." I yanked the axe free and stumbled backward. The snow at the overhang collapsed entirely, revealing a black maw in the earth, a vent or tunnel. Impossible this high on the ridge, its edges ringed with frost and glimmering mineral veins. Warm, damp air rolled out, smelling faintly of copper and old blood, and in that darkness, just for a heartbeat, I saw it. Not a face, not a body. Something more like a silhouette formed of sound, its edges shimmering with vibration, like heat haze turned into a being. It was vast and thin, reaching upward as if climbing through the stone toward me. I swung the headlamp away. Not out of choice, but because my hands were shaking so violently I couldn't hold it steady. When the beam passed back over the vent, it was empty. Just a black hole in the mountain. But the tracks in the snow now led right up to my boots. I stumbled back so quickly my crampons scraped loose shards of ice, my breath breaking into ragged bursts. The tracks, those elongated, dragging steps, ended at my very boots. I looked down, praying they'd melt into randomness if I blinked, but they didn't. They were clear, too clear. The print of something that had been standing exactly where I was now. "Think, Mateo," I hissed aloud, though my voice cracked like brittle glass. Talking kept me tethered. Talking meant I was still me, still human in a place that wanted to unravel me. The black vent yawned wider in the snow, a throat in the mountain's flesh. From inside came that rhythmic pulse again, like a drumbeat muffled by kilometers of rock. Then words, dozens of them, colliding and fracturing until one rose sharp above the rest. "You already belong." My stomach twisted. The storm outside the gulch had dulled to a white hiss, but inside here the air was thick, vibrating with intent. I felt it in my teeth, in the cavities of my skull. It was trying to enter me through resonance itself. I gripped the ice axe until my knuckles ached, swung it into the rock wall beside me, and let the metallic ring cut through the voices. The clang was sharp, imperfect, full of human error. For one moment, the echoes stuttered, like static in a radio broadcast. I had interrupted their frequency. That was my threat of survival. If this thing fed on resonance, maybe disruption could buy me time. I forced my legs into motion, scrambling back toward the ridgeline, my axe clanging against stone with each step, a crude percussion of defiance. The voices followed, but less synchronized now, overlapping in broken fragments. Some begged, some taunted, some wept. At the ridge, the storm reared back to life, icy wind clawing at my clothes. I welcomed it. At least the wind was honest. At least it didn't know my name. The path down was narrow and slick. I clipped the carabiner again, testing each anchor. My gloves were stiff with frost, but I refused to hurry. Panic kills faster than the mountain. Step by step I descended, the echoes battering my skull like waves against a hull. At one switchback, the path widened enough for me to rest. My thighs burned from the climb, my lungs scratched raw from the thin air. I set down the pack and pulled one of the canisters free. My fingers trembled as I pried off the cap. Inside, the magnetic tape gleamed faintly. I didn't have a player, no machine to interpret the signals stored there, but I didn't need one. I pressed the reel close to my ear. At first, silence, just the rasp of wind. Then, faint, almost too faint, the same resonance. A ghost of the voices captured decades ago. And beneath it, something worse. Screaming. Human screaming, distorted, cut short. The scientists had heard it too. They'd recorded it, tried to study it, and if the tapes had been left here, it meant they hadn't made it back down. A gust tore at my hood, snapping me from the trance. I shoved the reel back, sealed the canister, and shouldered the pack. My head spun. I couldn't think of the implications now. I needed altitude loss, oxygen, escape, but as I stepped forward, the snow shifted. Not beneath me. Around me. The drifts trembled as though something massive moved underneath, pacing me through the mountain's belly. Each tremor matched my step. I broke into a half-run, boots scraping sparks, axe biting ice. My breath wheezed ragged, steam frosting my mask. The echoes were no longer behind me. They were inside the very air, ahead, to the side, underneath, omnidirectional. One voice cut through, sharp as a blade. A child's voice, high and plaintive. "Papa, wait." I froze mid-step. My daughter's voice, clear. Impossible. "Papa, don't leave me." The sound came from below, from the fractures in the ridge. My heart wrenched so hard it nearly broke me in two. My daughter was safe, hundreds of kilometers away, but the voice was flawless. Intonation, rhythm, even the small lisp she hadn't grown out of yet. "Stop it," I snarled into the gale, my throat raw. "You don't get her. You don't even get her voice." For a second, silence, then laughter, low and resonant, rolling through the stone. I forced myself onward, clinging to rage like oxygen. My axe clanged with every strike, my breath heaved, and the gulch shrank behind me. Ahead lay the lower pass, its slope gentler, its rock less fractured. If I could reach it, I might outrun whatever stalked me. But halfway there, the storm thinned, and I saw them. Figures, 5 or 6 of them, scattered across the snow below. At first, they looked like mountaineers, bulky coats, hoods, the posture of climbers. Relief flared in me so bright I almost wept. Human, alive, maybe a rescue team. "Oi!" I shouted, my voice cracked by wind. I waved my arm. They didn't move, didn't even shift against the gale, just stood, turned toward me, heads tilted at the same angle. My relief iced over. The nearest figure lifted a hand in a stiff wave, too stiff, like the motion had been copied, not lived. And though the wind should have carried my shout away, a perfect echo of my own voice answered back from their direction. "Oye!" Mocking. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. The figures shimmered in the blowing snow, their outlines not quite right, their shadows bending the wrong way against the drifts. And then, as the storm surged, they flickered. One moment, 6 figures. The next, none. None. The snowfield was empty. But my name, in 6 overlapping voices, rolled up the ridge in unison. Mateo. The mountain itself had spoken. The sound of my name still rang in the stone, layered, elongated, as if the mountain had inhaled me whole. Every instinct told me to run, but running on a ridge meant suicide. I crouched low, pressing one gloved hand against the rock, forcing myself to breathe in measured counts. My crampons held. My axe was still in hand. The canisters still heavy on my back. I was alive. That had to mean something. The wind broke for just a moment, and in that pause I heard them again, those footsteps inside the rock. Deliberate, heavy, moving not across the surface but through the strata itself, like something enormous pacing beneath me. Each impact vibrated into my bones. I remembered the carved warning, "Don't listen," and I finally understood. Listening wasn't passive. Listening was opening. Every syllable wormed deeper, making me susceptible, pliable. The sound wasn't just sound, it was intrusion. I tore the radio from my pack. Old military issue, clunky but powerful. I thumbed it on, static rushing into the night. The hiss of white noise was almost soothing, drowning the voices. I pressed it against my ear, closed my eyes, and for a few breaths, the world was mine again. No whispers, no tricks, just interference. But the mountain wasn't finished. From the fissure below, a single low tone rose, so deep it vibrated the fillings in my teeth. My radio hiss warped, bent, as if the static itself were being tuned. And through it came a new voice. My own voice. perfectly copied. Mateo, give them back. I froze. The canisters. My pack seemed to grow heavier by the second. The reels inside weren't just archives, they were invitations. Whatever this thing was, it wanted them returned. Maybe the scientists who had recorded them had been led the same way, lured into the gulch, into the vent. No, I rasped, but it didn't sound convincing even to me. The voice in the radio repeated insistent, give them back. Home is below. Below. Always below. The mountain wanted me downward, into that vent, into its throat. The wind howled again, snow swirling like ash. I staggered forward, clinging to the rock. I had to descend to the valley, to the outpost. If I survived the storm, I could destroy the tapes, bury them anything. Just not here, not in its reach. But as I moved, the snow ahead shifted. A figure stepped into view. Human height. Human shape. My headlamp caught it at the edge of its beam, a hooded silhouette, coat flapping in the gale. Relief flared, then died as quick because it didn't move right. Its arms hung too long, swaying in a rhythm opposite the wind, and when I shouted over the storm, "Help, over here!" it shouted the same words back in my voice, perfectly timed, perfectly matched. I backed away, axe raised. The figure tilted its head, then opened its mouth. The sound that came out wasn't words. It was the mountain's frequency poured through a human throat. My vision blurred. The rock beneath me seemed to sway like water. I struck my axe into the ridge wall and forced my eyes shut, focusing on the anchor point, the cold metal, the real. The imitation voice cut short, replaced by laughter layered over itself, higher, lower, male, female, all at once. When I dared open my eyes, the figure was gone, but the tracks remained, fresh, leading not downward toward escape, but upward, toward the summit, toward the abandoned station. I couldn't help it. I screamed into the storm, a guttural cry torn from my lungs. I won't follow you. The mountain answered, soft as a mother's whisper, you already are. By the time I reached the lower pass, I was half delirious. My legs shook, my vision tunneled. The storm clawed at me, but at least it was only weather now. I collapsed beneath a tilted boulder, a meager shelter. My hands fumbled for the stove, the lighter. A flame sputtered alive, faint and blue. For the first time in hours, I felt heat, felt human. I cradled the flame close, willing it to remind me of who I was. The canisters pressed against my back like weights of guilt. I slid one free, staring at its dull steel casing. If I opened it here, if I unwound the tape into the fire, would it end? Would the mountain lose its hold? But another thought struck me, cold and merciless. What if burning it released everything? I sat there, shaking, flame guttering, the mountain murmuring all around me. The voices were softer now, almost tender. They spoke not to lure, not to mock, but to promise. No more storms, no more cold, home below. And as I stared into the tiny fire, the shadows cast on the snow began to move. Not with the wind, not with me. Shapes stretched and coiled, elongating like fingers reaching outward. The shadows wanted me too. The little blue flame wavered, fragile against the gale sneaking in through cracks of snow and rock. I cupped it with both hands, desperate to keep it alive, as though that single sputtering glow was the only thing separating me from being swallowed whole. Around me, the shadows stretched and twisted, no longer obeying the geometry of my body or the flicker of the stove. They bent in unnatural arcs, reaching across the snow like tendrils. I whispered to myself, an old trick I'd used in storms before when loneliness pressed too hard. You're Mateo, born in Salta, geologist. You've climbed these ridges before. You are real. But the voices returned, soft as snowfall, echoing my words back to me. You are Mateo, born in Salta, geologist. They spoke in chorus, repeating my identity until it no longer felt like mine, until it felt handed to me by them. I tightened my grip on the canister in my lap. Steel, cold, and heavy. Real. I snapped the lid open and tugged the reel out. The magnetic tape unwound in the wind like a black ribbon. It fluttered, caught in the firelight, and the voices grew louder as though the tape itself was a mouth. The shadow tendrils recoiled at the sight of flame, writhing at the edges of the gulch. Fire was disruption. Fire was imperfection. It didn't echo, it devoured. With a grimace, I fed the end of the tape into the flame. For a heartbeat, Nothing. Then the plastic-curled black smoke rising, acrid and foul. The mountain shuddered. A tremor rippled through the rock beneath me, not seismic but angry. The voices screamed. Hundreds, maybe thousands, their harmony breaking into jagged chaos. No, no. The gulch thundered like an organ collapsing, stone booming with fury. My ears rang so hard I thought my skull would split. I clamped my hands over them, but the sound wasn't in the air anymore. It was inside me, vibrating my bones. The fire sputtered under the sudden rush of wind. I shielded it desperately, but the flame shrank to a trembling ember. The shadows surged closer, bending across the snow, coiling around me. I yanked another reel free. My mind screamed against it. Don't. What if you need proof? What if you need evidence? But survival overruled reason. I flung the reel into the fire, tape spilling and catching. The blaze leapt high, hungry, orange now, casting jagged light across the gulch. The shadows scattered, recoiling into fissures, into cracks, into the hollow vent. The voices fractured into whispers again, then sobs, then silence. For the first time, silence. I slumped forward, chest heaving, heat licking my face. Tears froze instantly on my cheeks. I had won, at least for now. But victory was poisonously brief. The fire devoured fast. Plastic burned hot but short-lived. The flames dwindled as the second reel collapsed into molten lumps. The gulch darkened again, and from the vent below something vast inhaled. The air around me thinned, sucked downward into the mountain's throat. My stove flickered and died, starved of oxygen. The ember winked out. Darkness rushed back, and in that darkness I felt it fully for the first time, not just heard, not just glimpsed, but felt. A presence older than language, a hollow consciousness that filled the mountain like marrow. It wasn't just in the stone, it was the stone. The voice came again, singular this time, slow and patient. Fire will end, stone remains. You are stone. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the axe. I staggered to my feet, scanning the ridge for escape, but every direction was wrong. Snow had shifted, landmarks blurred. It was as though the mountain had rearranged itself while I burned the tapes. The fissures glowed faintly now, a dull red pulsing like veins. From within them, low moans escaped, not voices, not language, but the sound of resonance itself, tuned to a pitch that made my stomach twist. I ran. No thought, no plan, just raw animal flight. My crampons tore into ice, my lungs clawed at air. Behind me, the gulch roared, a cavernous exhale that seemed to push me forward. The slope steepened into its chute, slick with ice. I barely had time to anchor my axe before sliding headlong. The blade bit rock, sparks spraying, my arm nearly yanked from its socket. I dangled for a heartbeat over nothing, then hauled myself sideways, rolling into a shallow outcrop. Snow poured over me, burying me to the chest. I clawed free, gasping. The night was endless, the storm raging, but I could see faint light far below. The outpost, the research hut where this nightmare had begun. Salvation, or a trap. But I had no choice. I scrambled downward, half climbing, half falling, my body a puppet jerked by exhaustion. My headlamp flickered weakly, battery nearly gone. Each step I expected the stone beneath me to open, to reveal another vent, another impossible maw. The voices stayed quiet now, waiting. It was almost worse than the chorus. At last, my boots crunched onto flatter ground. The outpost loomed through the snow, a dark silhouette, half buried, its antenna crooked. A single window faintly glowed with dying generator light. I staggered to the door, pounded it with my fist, then wrenched it open. Warmth hit me, a stale, metallic heat from old machinery. Inside, the cabin smelled of rust and mold, but it was human. 4 walls. A door I could bolt. I slammed it shut and leaned against it, chest heaving, every muscle trembling. On the desk lay a rusted tape player, half broken, reels already threaded. Someone had left it here decades ago. My gaze fixed on it like a curse. The last canister in my pack seemed to grow heavier, pulling at me. I could throw it into the stove, destroy it like the others. But part of me needed to hear what the mountain had left behind. The silence stretched, oppressive. My hand reached for the player, trembling. And from the machine, before I touched it, a click. A soft whir. The reels turned on their own. And through the speaker, in a voice that was my own, came the words, "You made it home." The sound of my own voice coming from that speaker froze me where I stood. It wasn't a recording of something I'd said, it was something I was about to say. The cadence, the exhaustion, the despair, it was my voice a few seconds ahead of me. "You made it home," the tape repeated, softer this time, almost tender. I clutched the edge of the desk, bile rising in my throat. My hand hovered near the last canister in my pack, my thumb digging into the steel lip until it cut the skin through my glove. The tape reel spun lazily, magnetic ribbon whispering across corroded heads, a serpent uncoiling sound. "Stop it," I whispered. And the player, obedient as a dog, answered in my voice again, "Stop it." I slammed my fist down. The machine rattled, but it didn't stop. The reels turned, steady, patient. I yanked the cord from the wall. Sparks jumped. The reels slowed and then picked up again, spinning under no power at all. It didn't need electricity. The mountain powered it. I stumbled back, grabbing the axe, raising it high. One good swing, and I could smash it into fragments. But a thought cut through me like sleet. What if the only way out is in? If the others had destroyed their tapes, maybe that was why none of them had ever left. Maybe listening was the only way to understand what it wanted. The voices had always pulled me downward, into resonance, into alignment. Destroying had bought me time, but not freedom. The last canister throbbed in my hand, heavy, magnetic, a heart. I sat trembling in the rickety chair before the machine. My gloves felt like stone as I unwound the reel, threaded the tape through the spools, set it onto the player. For a moment, silence. Then the tape hissed, faint static, as if a blizzard had been pressed into its thin black veins. Underneath, whispers. At first too quiet, then louder. Dozens of voices, some sobbing, some chanting, all bleeding into one another until they became a low droning hum. I leaned closer, jaw clenched. The hum split. One voice rose distinct above the rest. My voice. "You've been here before?" I shoved away from the desk, chair clattering. No, I haven't." But the tape continued, my voice layered and endless, repeating, "You've been here before. You've been here before." The shadows at the edge of the room stretched, quivering against the walls. The cabin creaked like ribs under pressure. The mountain was pressing inward. "Think," I begged myself, slamming the heel of my hand against my skull as if that could silence it. "Think of anything real. Your daughter's smile, your wife's hair, the first stone core you pulled at Cerro Pabellon." But the tape stole even those. It shifted, spitting out her laugh in perfect mimicry, then the whisper of my wife's voice, then the sound of drills on stone. It wasn't stealing memories. It already had them. The mountain had always had them. I lurched forward and ripped the reel free. Tape spooled across the floor like intestines, uncoiling in long black ribbons. I flung them into the stove, into the tiny guttering flame I'd coaxed to life. The plastic shriveled, smoked, screamed. Yes, screamed. The burning tape gave voice as it died, thousands of mouths shrieking through the cabin. The walls rattled, the window cracked. The floor buckled, but the player kept spinning, though no tape remained. The spools whirred, empty, shrieking with a pitch that drilled straight into my skull. The shadows surged, filling the corners, stretching tall as the ceiling. They bent, faces forming, faces of climbers, scientists, voices I'd heard, voices I'd loved. They leaned close, whispering, "Join us, be stone, be sound." I clutched the axe so hard my bones ached, the only thing I had left to break, the only imperfection left to wield. The reels spun faster, blurring until they whined like turbines. The voices crescendoed into a single thunderous demand, "Down!" The floor cracked beneath my boots. Snow hissed in through the doorframe. The mountain wasn't asking anymore. It was opening. A vent yawned beneath the cabin, splitting wood and stone alike. Heat belched upward, the breath of something ancient. I teetered on the edge, staring into the vent's glow. A hollow, infinite throat, red and black, alive with movement. Shapes shifted below, crawling over one another, their voices forming the choir that had haunted me since I'd arrived. I knew in that instant, every missing climber, every vanished scientist, every scream captured on tape, they weren't gone. They were below, folded into the resonance, living forever in the echo. The mountain was offering me eternity. I raised the axe. The cabin shook. The reels spun. The vent widened. For one heartbeat, I believed, maybe stone was better than bone. Maybe sound was better than silence. Then I thought of my daughter calling me papa, of her small hand in mine. And I swung. The axe cleaved through the machine, sparks bursting, reels snapping free, shards of steel biting my arm. The voices cut out mid-scream, a vacuum of silence collapsing around me. The shadows recoiled, tearing back into the fissures. The vent below thundered once, furious, then began to close. Stone grinding on stone. I staggered back, chest heaving, sweat freezing on my face. The outpost was collapsing. Beams cracked, snow poured in, the mountain sealing itself shut. I ran, out the door, into the storm, stumbling into the night. The ridge groaned, avalanches tumbling in distant valleys, the whole massif trembling in rage. But I didn't stop. Not until the gulch was a smear behind me, not until my body gave out and I collapsed against a drift. The voices had gone silent. The reels were ash. The mountain was wounded, but not dead. Never dead. The mountain had gone quiet, but the silence didn't comfort me. It was too total, too complete. The kind of silence you only find after an avalanche when everything living is buried. I lay half-buried myself, chest heaving, face pressed against snow so cold it burned. My breath roared in my ears, the only sound I could trust, or thought I could trust. Because after a while, even my breathing didn't sound right. It came back to me with the faintest delay, like the air itself was repeating at a fraction of a second late. Inhale. Exhale. Then again, softer. Almost imperceptible, but there, an echo where there shouldn't be one. I rolled onto my back, gasping at the pale smear of sky. The storm had broken. Clouds thinned, stars sharp above. The ridge stretched black and jagged, its flanks now still. My body screamed in exhaustion, but the silence gnawed worse. I had to move. Each step down the slope was a negotiation with my legs. My crampons bit at ice crust, slipping too often. My axe dragged behind me, too heavy, yet I couldn't let it go. It had saved me more than once, not just as a tool, but as proof I still existed. Below, the valley spread out, a dark bowl fringed by shadowed peaks. Somewhere at its center, the access road wound toward civilization. If I could reach it by dawn, maybe I'd find another climber, a ranger's station, anything. But the silence followed. A rabbit burst from the snow ahead of me, startling me so badly I dropped to a knee. It bolted across the drifts, leaving a scatter of paw prints. But even that sound, the patter of claws on crust, echoed faintly back. I staggered after it, half crazed, until the slope leveled into a small plateau. My thighs burned, my lungs scraped. I collapsed by a boulder, pressing my face into my gloves, and then I heard it. Not from the mountain, from inside me. A hum, low, steady, vibrating against my ribs. I pressed a palm to my chest, certain I'd feel only my hammering heartbeat. But beneath it, there it was. Resonance. The mountain's song had followed me down. I scrambled to my feet, panic crashing over me. I swung the axe wildly, striking stone, metal ringing into the night. The sound clanged sharp, human. My hum wavered, stuttered, then steadied again, stronger. "No," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You don't get me. Not down here." But the whisper came back from the hollow of my chest, from the bones of my skull. Already ours. I collapsed to my knees, slamming my forehead against the cold stone, desperate to jar it out. Spots burst across my vision. My teeth ached with the vibration. I clawed open my pack. The last scraps of melted tape still clung to the steel rim of the empty canister, fused plastic twisted into black ribbons. I hurled it into the snow, but it didn't matter. I could feel the truth. I'd carried more than the canisters down with me. The mountain had threaded itself into me. I dragged myself up again, stumbling across the plateau, down into the narrowing pass. The stars wheeled above, unfamiliar, too bright, as though I'd stepped into some mirror of the world I knew. Every so often I'd hear footsteps behind me. I'd whirl, axe raised, but the snow was empty. Still, the prints remained, long, dragging, matching the ones I'd seen at the gulch. Following me down now, I started muttering just to keep myself anchored. Equations, mineral compositions, half-remembered lullabies I'd sung to my daughter. Anything imperfect, anything human. But the mutters came back, not from my lips, but from inside my throat, delayed, as though the resonance in me was practicing, learning, perfecting my voice. By the time the first pale light of dawn reached the peaks, I was staggering like a drunk, half-mad with fatigue. The pass opened at last, revealing the valley floor, a stretch of tundra threaded with the faint glimmer of road. I fell to my knees, tears freezing on my face. Civilization lay somewhere beyond. I could survive this. I could crawl if I had to. And then, faint, rolling up the valley like a sigh of wind, came a child's voice. "Papa!" I choked, covering my ears. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible this far down. "Papa! Wait!" I staggered upright, screaming into the dawn. "You don't have her. You will never have her." But the answer came from my own chest, low and patient, in a voice I couldn't deny was mine. "She will listen, like you did." The road lay ahead, salvation tangible. But every step I took, the hum inside me deepened, resonating with the stone under my feet. The mountain no longer needed to call from above. It was carrying itself down inside me. The valley road stretched before me like salvation carved into dirt and ice. Its frozen ruts gleamed faintly in the newborn light, proof of human presence, proof that the world beyond the mountains still existed. I fell to my knees at its edge, hands sinking into frost-bitten gravel, and I wept. But even as the tears froze on my cheeks, the hum inside me did not let go. It had deepened with every step down the slope, until now it was a constant undertone threading beneath my breath. Not loud, not urgent, just patient. A frequency that felt like it could wait forever. I staggered onto the road, legs trembling, boots scraping. Civilization lay hours away, but at least the way forward was clear. With each step, though, the resonance traveled with me. The sound was no longer external. No whispers from vents, no mimicry from the storm. Now it was me. I tried singing under my breath, a song my daughter had once loved about the river in summer. The words cracked in the cold, but I forced them out. Imperfect, human. For 3 notes, it worked. Then my own voice joined in, half a beat behind, a harmony I hadn't sung. I clutched my chest, shaking my head violently. No, you stay in the stone. You stay up there. But the answer rose from my ribs, soft and tender as a lullaby. We travel, we last. You carry us now. The road blurred through tears. My vision tunneled, body swaying. I fell into the ditch, heaving until my stomach was empty, acid burning my throat. The sound didn't leave. It only steadied, as if waiting for me to accept. I crawled back to the road. Crawling was safer anyway. If I walked, I might start following voices again. My gloves tore on gravel, blood streaking snow. Each pull forward was an act of rebellion, each gasp of breath a refusal to be hollowed out. Hours passed. The light grew, pale and merciless. The peaks burned gold behind me, and with daylight came something worse. The hum inside me began to modulate, shaping itself. No longer just a frequency, but words, faint and broken. They used my own lungs, my own vocal cords. Already stone, I rasped without meaning to, the words spilling out unbidden. I clamped both hands over my mouth, sobbing, rocking in the snow. But when I breathed again, the phrase came once more, whispered from between clenched teeth. Already stone. The echo was inside me, rehearsing, practicing. Soon it would speak freely. And when it did, would there be anything of me left at all? By late afternoon, the road dipped toward a ranger's hut, half buried in drifts. My body lurched toward it with a will that was no longer mine. I prayed it wasn't abandoned, that some soul still tended it. I needed witness, proof. If someone else saw me, heard me, maybe it could anchor me. The door groaned as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale but warmer. A table, a bunk, a cold stove. On the desk, a radio sat crooked, the kind rangers used to call in weather reports. My knees gave way. I crawled to the desk, fumbled the dial with raw fingers. Static filled the room, the hiss of interference, sweet human chaos. I pressed the speaker against my ear, tears streaming. The white noise drowned the hum for a moment. Blessed silence within me. I could breathe. I could think. But then the static bent, shifted, and through it my daughter's voice rose clear. "Papa, you're late." I ripped the radio from the wall and hurled it across the cabin. It shattered, sparks fizzing. My scream tore from my chest, but it wasn't mine alone. It came doubled, layered, my voice and its echo overlapping. I froze, staring at the walls. The sound hadn't come from outside. It had come from inside my throat. Night fell again. I lit the stove, huddled against it, body shivering though the flame warmed the air. Every crack of wood, every shift of wind outside seemed to fall into rhythm with the resonance inside me. I thought of burning myself, ending it before it could finish taking root. I imagined pressing my arm into the fire, imagined smoke rising from skin. Would that silence it, or would the mountain sing louder through the hole it left behind? The thought terrified me more than death, so I sat and listened, and the echo spoke, calm, certain, eternal. You carried us down. We are in you now. Your bones remember, your voice will call. When you speak, we will answer, and others will listen. I clutched the axe close to my chest, rocking back and forth like a child. My own whisper bled into the cabin, unbidden, soft and certain. When you speak, we will answer. I don't know if it was me anymore. I write this by the stove's light, in a notebook left by the Rangers. My hand shakes, letters doubling on the page. I keep hearing myself speak as I write, though I haven't moved my lips in minutes. The echo is patient. It knows I am too tired to resist much longer. If someone finds this, destroy it. Burn the notebook. Burn my body if you must. Don't let the mountain's voice travel further. But I fear it's already too late, because even as I scrawl these words, I hear something outside the hut. Footsteps, soft, approaching slow across the snow, and a voice, familiar, calling gently, Mateo, you made it home. I want to believe it's rescue. I want to believe the world beyond the mountain is still waiting. But the hum in my chest answers before I can, vibrating through my ribs, opening my throat in unison. And with my own voice, layered and hollow, I whisper back through the crack of the door, yes, I'm home.